second gear is completely out on this thing. Every other gear works except second. The whole engine has to come out. Now the whole cam can pull out. Little side to side and 0 up and down. There we go. That popped off. Let's see here. There we go. See the problem. Wow. That's why. Look at that. This end of the shaft goes into a bearing. That is the inner bearing race. Never seen this before. There's the bearing that the transmission goes into. The whole thing just broke apart. Well, after a long 6 months, we're finally back with the 2001 Yamaha Raptor 660. If you guys remember the last video on this machine, we picked this thing up for $1,000. It was in super rough condition. It would not run, would not shift. It was pretty bad. But last video we got it to run correctly, but it was smoking a ton and still wouldn't shift. So when we went to shift this thing, it would grind in gear, lock up, and then shut off. And there was no way around it. It had to be fixed. So we took the engine out, tore into the engine, and we found a major problem with it. The transmission bearing here was basically gone. The ball bearings were down in the case half. A bunch of metal shavings were floating around from the bearing hollowing out the case here, and it was just awful. So I actually sent this case out to my good friend Jim, and I'll leave his channel in the description if you want to check it out. But there's actually a video of him repairing this case, and you can see the damage. It was awful, and he did a great job. You can't even tell that it was repaired. That is a brand new bearing in there, by the way, so he put that in. But yeah, he did a great job, and I'll let him explain what he did. He dropped this thing off the other day, and he kind of walked me through it, so I'll let him explain it, and then we'll come back. All right, my friend Jim here just dropped off the case for the Raptor 660. And he has a channel called VW Works where he did the whole repair, and it looks awesome. So if you want to explain what you did.
Yep, what we did here is this was all ground up from that shaft, that bearing failing. So what I did is put it on a mill, and we resurfaced the seat that this bearing sits down on, and put the bearing back in with some retaining compound, some Loctite 660. So it should hold in there as good as new.
Yeah, look at that repair. Can't even tell that was damaged before. Looks awesome. So Jim does great work. Go check him out on YouTube and go give him a couple likes and subscribers. It's awesome how he does that. That's crazy. But yeah, look at how clean that is.
Yeah, should be good to go. So one other thing too I could tell you is some of these bearings in here have a seal on here. You're going to want to make sure you remove that seal.
Okay.
It's a sealed bearing, so you gotta remove that so the oil gets added. But if they're not sealed originally, make sure you pull the seal out.
Okay.
Of any new bearings.
Yep, that's a good tip. So we can start working on this machine. The goal for today is to get this whole engine repaired and back in here and hopefully have a good running driving machine by the end of the video. So we have a ton of work to do. We've got to get all new bearings in both case halves, and we're going to start with that first. So what we're going to do is clean out this case. We've got the new bearings here for this case half, and then we've got the other ones over here along with new seals we can put in. So we're going to start with that. Jim cleaned out this whole case and did all the bearings here. We'll start working on this case half first. What we're going to do Just get all the metal chunks out of here. Spray this down with some brake cleaner. Get this all cleaned out. The chunks were really big, so we got most of them out right away. Nothing was too crazy in there. Just want to clean out everything really well. Start pushing some of those bearings out. All right, we got this case half very cleaned out. All the metal shavings are out of it. And then we got the cases cleaned up here. Went around and took a wire brush and went around all the cases to get off all the loose dirt. So all the loose dirt's off of it, looking good. What we're gonna do is press out these bearings now. All right, let's get the crank bearing pushed out of here. So tighten that up and pump this till that bearing comes out. There it goes. Popped out. Take a peek. All right, there's the old bearing. Didn't feel too bad, but we've got new ones, so we may as well replace it. It doesn't feel awful. Right out. Not much force on there. Alright, let's see what that bearing looks like. Wasn't horrible. A little crunchy in there. But we've got it, we'll replace it. That bearing was pretty rough. This bearing here has a couple screws holding that on. A little stopper plate. Try to get that out. Those are definitely Loctited in. There, that one came off pretty easily. It's got that retaining clip there, so this can push through this way. So you can push that through. Not much holding that one in. All right, there it is. This was sitting in the freezer for like 10 minutes, so it won't drop right in. But the lettering, says Germany right here, on the inside of the case. So that'll go right like that. Feels pretty darn good right there. And you want to check and see if that's flush with the case on the back side of the bearing. Make sure that bearing's seated all the way. As you can see, it is. Looks nice all the way around. Alright, the rest of the bearings just dropped right in. They were perfect. It was really easy. All we did was heat the case, and gave it like 1 pound, and they seated perfectly in. So all the bearings feel really good now. We're gonna use some red Loctite on these. That one in there. Getting some assembly lube going on all these bearings here. All right, over here we have the transmission, the counterbalance shaft, the drum, shift forks, and pins. There's the diagram. We just went over the whole diagram, checked every gear, made sure every gear was good, and everything looks perfect. We have all the gears in place, all the washers in place. Everything is within spec. So we can start installing the transmission into the case half. Let's get this transmission in. We are going to start with this piece here. This is going to go into the notched out part that fits that piece right here. It's gonna go straight down like that. It'll kind of click into place, and then you can't rotate that. See that? All right, now transmission can go in. It's gonna go in just like this, straight down just like this. Just drop in. Perfect right there. All right, then we can get our drum in, get the forks in, but drum can go in, goes face down here, and this piece pivots and is spring loaded, and it goes into that groove here. There, it's locked in. Now we've got shift fork letter C going in. So this is going to go on the center on here and ride that one. Pin can go in. And then we have letter L at the top and then R at the bottom. There. Ride right here on the top groove. Make sure all those are in their correct groove here. There we go. Now the transmission should spin smoothly without binding. Looks good. We can get our counterbalance shaft in. Got the notched out part going up. Smooth one going down into the left side case, just like that. All right, we got this side all ready to go. We've got the filter screen on there, tightened down with blue Loctite, and then the little stopper plate there. We had to make a new gasket for that. That's got blue Loctite on it. So now what we can do is get some assembly lube on all the bearings. These bearings already have grease in them. They're pre-greased. Doesn't hurt to have a little assembly lube and everything. Get those going. Alright, that looks good. Now what we're going to do is spray off the case halves with brake cleaner. so we can get the gasket maker on it. Clean off the surface really well. We already took a razor blade and scraped off the old gasket maker. All right. Wipe off this case half here. We want this gasket maker really sticking. Otherwise you'll have a leak at the case half. Another important piece is right here. That connects the two case halves together. There's an oil passage here. Just need that with the O-ring on there. This is drying pretty quick because it's so hot out. So we have to kind of work fast. Alright, that looks pretty good. So it's just going to drop in here, just like this. Make sure everything's in place. Alright, we can get the case half bolts in. Alright, case halves are back together. Everything is spinning smoothly, crank spins smooth. So everything is good to go here. So everything moves properly. Let's start getting the clutch side done. So the shift star goes on first. You can see this is what it looks like. There's a little dot here that lines up with the notch there. That's going to line up with the shift drum. Just like that. I'm going to put some blue Loctite on the bolt that holds that in place. Alright, we'll torque that down to 22 foot-pounds. Alright, at this stage, I like to go through and see if it's shifting properly. So, you can spin this and spin this. Right now we're in neutral. You can see the shaft here does not spin as you rotate this shaft. And neutral, you can see, is on the top of that piece right there. Alright, there's second gear. Third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear. Perfect. And there is, let's see if we can shift into first. There we go. So it's shifting through all the gears. That's awesome. All right, shifter mechanism going in. Got the compressed springs there. It's going to go in. I can hold these springs in place. All right, get this maneuvered into place here. There we go, just like that. We put some thread locker on the bolts here. Get those going. All right, let's go ahead and put our spring on here. So we're going to stretch it all the way over here. Just like that. Now there's tension there. All right, shift shaft going through. You've got your washer on there. That goes all the way through. We've got the new seal on the other side, greased up, ready to go. Perfect. All right, now we're working on the oil pump. Let's go ahead and get those old O-rings out of there. You can see they're kind of in rough condition here. We will replace those with new ones. New ones going in. All right, oil pump. New gasket going on. It's gonna go on just like this. All right, now that the gasket's on, we can get our pump on. There's two oil holes right there and right there. They line up with these two. Got the new O-rings in, so this can go in. All right, we've got the oil pump gear here going on. Line that up, and then our little snap ring goes on after that. Make sure that's spinning properly. All right, that feels good. All right, next we have the speed sensor gear going on. So we're going to get the O-ring on first here. This goes in the second groove. Just like that. Make sure that's seated. And here's the actual gear. So it's got a little notch here. Lines up with the notch there. Then you've got your springed washer here that goes on. You've got a normal washer that goes on. And then you have your other snap ring that goes on into the first groove. Kind of have to compress the washer here. All right, let's see if that's in the groove. All right, that's actually compressed now and tight. Make sure that snap ring is actually in the groove because that takes a little bit of force. All right, time for the balancer gear. Little key goes in the groove there. Then you've got your gear here that goes over the key and the shaft. Slide right on like that. Then you've got your lock washer. Tab goes down into there. And then your nut. And we'll just get that lightly tightened down for now. Alright, so a thicker washer goes on first, like that. And then your key goes in like that. And you've got the washer with the slot for the key, just like that. And then you've got your gear. It's two gears here. And there's a little dot there that's going to line up with the dot on the balancer right here. So let's do that. Line up the keyway. Get this one on first. All right, now we can turn this. while turning this one. We're going to line this up. So now you can see 2 dots are lined up across from each other. And obviously that's so that the balancer doesn't hit the crank as you rotate it. So you can rotate this thing over. It shouldn't hit at all. If it does, you did something wrong. But that's a good check. So we rotated that over. Nothing hits. Your lock washer goes on. And then your nut. And we'll get these torqued down. Alright, torqued down, tabs are folded over, locked in place, both nuts. Alright, let's move on. Alright, finally the clutch. So the clutch basket can go on next. This goes on just like that, no washer or anything on the back side of that bearing. So it goes straight on. Just like that. And then you've got your washer, lines up with the grooves in the shaft there. Basket going on. After that, that's to line up perfectly. There we go. All right, time to get the clutch plates in. So with the clutch plates, we're gonna do thicker plate first. This is a thicker width of a plate. That goes in first. Then your steel plate, and then just rotate until the 5th one, and we're gonna do a skinnier plate. I'll show you. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So then the next plate is going to be the skinnier diameter, like that. See? Skinnier thickness. That's the 5th plate, and then just normal steel plate. And the last one's going to be skinny as well. And I'll show you why in a second here. Alright, last steel plate going in, and then your skinny width one going in last. So this little grab bar here, washer bearing, that goes through here, arrow on here, lines up with the dot here, just like this. Then you've got your springs and bolts, and that's it. So not too bad. We can tighten those down. Gasket going on. All right, this little puller piece for the clutch has 2 sides. See that side that's rougher? It has those little teeth on it. That's gonna face towards the left. It's gonna line up with this piece right here when you put this on. All right, and then the water pump impeller and gear is going on. This goes on just like this. Slide that on. Also new O-ring right in there. All right, moving on to the left-hand side, let's replace the seal here quick. You can see it's pretty crusty in there. There's the old one. All right, here's the new one. Push that one in place. All right, and this plate goes over it. Put a little grease on this collar piece here. All right, cam chain going in. Just like that. You've got your guide going in. Put a little blue Loctite on those. Flywheel, so we don't want that. All right, let's get the flywheel on. So washer goes behind here, just like that. You've got your roller bearing there. All right, then you've got your woodruff key here. Let's see, where the heck is it? Put that in there. Now we can get our flywheel on. Washer. Your nut. All right, everything is pretty much complete on the bottom end. Let's start working on the top end. All right, so we ended up getting a 2mm overbore big bore kit for this thing, and looks pretty nice. So we are going to wipe that down and check out the piston rings before we install it. But it came with everything, and came with the big O-ring for it as well. So what we're first going to do is get the O-ring on before we forget to do that. So this goes on the bottom of the cylinder. Just going to oil that up. It's going to go right here. Just like that. Now we're going to measure the ring gap. See what those are at. Here are the rings. And as you can see, they are numbered. I guess there's markings on them, I should say. There's an R and an N. And then here's the top ring with an R. So the top ring has that shiny metal on the outside, the bottom ring does not. So let's do the top ring first. Measure that. And that looks like it's gonna be really good. It's right there. I'm guessing that's like 14 thousandths of an inch. Exactly 14 thousandths. So that is perfect. Check the second ring here. Again, that ring gap looks really good. Nice and small. It's probably gonna be 14. It's a little bit bigger than 14. Maybe 15 or 16. Yep, 16. So that's pretty good. All right, so rings check out. Let's get the rings installed onto the piston. So we can get our oil ring on here. Just like that. These guys go on either side of the oil ring. There we go. Gotta get this one on too. Alright, perfect. Then we can get our bottom ring on. second ring, I should say. Fits in there like that. Then our top ring with the shiny side going on. Now we want to orientate these ring gaps before we put them on. So one is going to be here, one is going to be 180 away from the first one, like that. So you've got one here, one there, and same with the oil rings. One there, and one, where is it? There. So we're good there. Then we're going to get one clip in. All right, base gasket going on first. Just gonna wipe that down a little bit. Brake cleaner on a rag. Get up all that oil. Let's get a little bit on there. Just a very thin amount on there. Through. Alright, let's get all the rings lubed up. Get the piston lubed up here. A bit on there. A little bit on the cylinder here. Alright, now we can install the piston. So the arrow is going to be facing towards the exhaust, so this way. So we'll get our pin started here. So just like that. Remember, we already have the clip in the other side, so we just have to get the other clip in this side. Alright, now the hard part is getting the cylinder on. It's probably the hardest part of the whole thing, so let's see if we can get her to go. Usually they're not too bad. As long as those oil rings go, we should be fine. Alright, get these bolts in. We're going to torque these cylinder bolts to 30 foot-pounds, crisscross pattern. Alright, time to start working on the head here. We are going to take off all the valves, clean those all off, and then replace all the valve seals. So let's get going on that. Alright, we're starting with the exhaust valve here. Get those off, so we're just going to compress those. Get those little keepers out. There's one. There's two. All right, back that off. spring. Push that valve out. Lots of carbon on there. So we're gonna go ahead and take a wire wheel and take off all that carbon on the top and the bottom of the valve. And then if these are steel valves, we can lap these in. If they're not steel, you don't want to lap them in. It will take off that coating on the valve and wreck it. This is probably the most tedious part of the whole build, is taking all these apart, but it's definitely worth it in the end to have fresh valves and valve seals. So if you look right here, you can see the valve seals, and those are pretty worn out. See those? The holes in those are really big. And these are the new ones here. You can see the difference. All right, we took one of the valve seals off. Let's take the other one off. I like to use the vice grips and just kind of lightly pull on them. They pop right off like that. And you can see the difference between the new valve seal and the old one. Look at the hole size. Those actually look pretty good. Not a ton of carbon on those. Alright, all the valves are out. If you take a look at the exhaust valves, you can see they're not magnetic. Magnet does not stick to them. So you don't want to lap these, and we can still clean up the carbon, but these are not magnetic at all. Just the springs there. They'll take off that coating and wreck them. But the intake valves, these are steel. So you can actually lap those in. So what we're going to do is take some lapping compound and lap those in. Let's go ahead and get the rest of the valve seals out. It looks like this one was replaced at one point with a newer one. That one's green, the rest of them are black. So somebody was in here replacing them. Those are the old ones. Alright, we took a wire wheel to all the valves, cleaned them all up. They look brand new. Looks really good. Here are the intake valves. Looking good. So now we're going to lap in the intake valves. We've got a little valve grinding compound. Put a little bit on this one right here. Sticker valve in. You should be able to see a gray line going all the way around the valve that's evenly spaced. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Clean off that valve grind compound, and we can move on to the next one. Alright, we got the surfaces lapped here. Let's turn this thing around and install the valve seals. Taking a dab of oil. We can just push these guys on. Last one. Alright, all the valve seals are in place. Let's get the exhaust valves back in first. So this one is going to go right through here. Get our spring on. Get the little keepers in. So, those were a little tricky to get in there, but that one's in. All right, head is all back together, looking pretty good. We can now install that onto the rest of the engine. Let's see if that lays flat there. That looks pretty good right there, doesn't it? Take a magnet. Get that lined up here. Make sure that gasket's not getting pinched. Believe they're all the same size. Go underneath here. The head torque specs are 27 foot-pounds. Crisscross pattern here. All right, then we can get our chain guide in here. You want to make sure that's going all the way down in the correct groove down there. All right, we went ahead and put the cover on, the starter on. That stuff is just self-explanatory. The cover goes on with one gear behind here, and then just the starter gear. So now we rotated this thing over to top dead center, and as you look in here, you can see there's a line on the flywheel right there that lines up with the notch right here. It's gonna be a single line, just like that. And before that line, there's two single lines, like an H. You wanna go to the last single line like that, and then you're gonna come up here and check and make sure that your piston's at the top of the cylinder. There it is, you can see all shiny down in there. So we are in fact at top dead center. Now we can get the cam in. All right, to get the cam in, lobes are pointing down on the cam, and then the two dots right here and right here are gonna be parallel to the surface here. So we're gonna try to get this cam on. All right, as you can see, the dots are parallel to the surface of the head. Looking good. Cam lobes are pointed down. All right, now we can get the tensioner in, get this tension up, and then get the valve cover on. New gasket on the tensioner here. Let's get that in. You got your spring and the nut. This goes in there like that. And as you rotate the engine over, it'll self-tension. You can hear it go. Go all the way around the cover. little gasket maker in here as well. This piece sits right back in here. Just like that. Good. So the intake specs are 4 to 6 thousandths. The exhaust are 6 to 8 thousandths of an inch. So let's see here. We're gonna set them to 5. Let's see what they're at. That one's exactly 5. That one's pretty good. All those are pretty good. Oh, these are gonna be set to 7 thousandths. One of them felt pretty loose. I think that one. Perfect. All right, last piece to the puzzle before we install this engine is the spark plug. Let's get that in. Drop that in. All right, engine is complete. Let's install it into the quad here. All right, this thing's a heavy beast. Yeah. Don't break anything here. Not extremely light. All right, engine's mounted down. All the lines are hooked up. Let's get the cooling hoses hooked up. So there's one down here. Get that one secured. All right, new gasket's going on. I put a little grease on there just to hold it in place so you can get the header pipe on. Usually sticks it right to the surface there. Here's the other one. Here. All right, let's quick go through the carbs. Everything else is on the machine except for the carbs. So I can't remember if we went through these or not last video. I think we did, but it's been like 6 months, so may as well check. Let's see what these look like. Yeah. Let's take out the pilot and just see if that's good. But that looks like a freshly rebuilt carb. It's a pretty good sign. Let's see, running a 45 pilot. Yep, perfectly clear. So these carbs we already went through. We can get these on the machine. Choke goes in. All right, air box going in. This one's got a new filter on it. Let's get that in place. Well, this thing's coming along. We've got the gas tank back on, air filter back on. We are going to get some oil going to it. This thing takes 2.1 quarts with an oil filter change, or 2.5 with a full engine rebuild, which we did. So we are going to fill it up with 1.5 quarts in the tank, try to run this thing, and then fill it up with the rest. The tank only holds like 1.5 quarts. There's a little bit in the tank. Let's take a look. We're using 10W40 wet clutch oil. And half a quart going in, and then we'll attempt to fire this thing up. All right, she's good to go. Let's fire this thing up. All right, well, this thing's been fully rebuilt. Everything is new on it, so she should fire up as long as we put everything back together correctly. That was a lot of parts to put back together, so we will see. Let's hook up a jumper to it, turn it over, and see what happens. Remember, we can only run it for a little bit because we have to fill it up with the rest of the oil. Choke it. Go. Probably need some gas in it. It's running. Let's add the rest of the oil. Another quart going in. Quart going in. We might have to fire it one more time to add everything, but we'll see. Alright, I took another quart. That's good. Alright, so that oil pump's working. Alright, start number 2. Let's see if we can get this thing to idle. Idling pretty good. No knocking in the top end, no smoke.